But when it comes to like real conflict, like true conflict, like you and I have a very strong difference of opinion on X. How are we going to figure this out? Like for me, actually, Morgan and I had this happen recently. Like she was really struggling with her perception of what my reality was. And the perception that she had was leading her to resent me and was leading her to be frustrated with me. And like the baseline waking up every day on the frustration level was more than 0, right? Without anything even happening. You're just existing, and she was elevated. And she brought it to me, and we ended up having like a 4-hour conversation about all of it. And I wasn't really sure exactly how to navigate it, but I knew that she wanted some kind of clarity. And I knew that I wanted to address her perception to identify if that was actually reality or not. And so what I did was I said, I want to talk about this with you completely. You make a list of 5 things that you want to take away from this conversation. I'll make a list of 5 things that I want to take away from this conversation. We'll sit down, whether we share the lists or not, doesn't matter, but we're going to take those things away and we're going to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And so we did. She was on the couch in the corner. I was sitting on the fireplace, and we were, 12 feet away from each other and just talking and taking notes. And when something would come up, like a new folder would open and we would say, do you want to address this now or address it later? And we went through the whole thing. And the result of that was a much deeper understanding of where each other was at. Identification that like her perception didn't necessarily match the reality of the situation, what she thought was going on in my mind, right? Because she had ideas of what I was thinking, and I'm like, just ask me, right? And so, like getting to the resolution of things, I think it's number one, if you're hot about it, step away, right? That's the first thing. If something is like warm right now, like step away for a second, take a breath, because as soon as you start operating out of anger, like, the rational thought goes out the window. You start saying things maybe you don't necessarily mean or want to say. So like return with cool heads and tackle it as tactfully as possible and put like as nice of a bow on it as you possibly can, so that if something needs to be revisited, sure, let's come back and revisit it. But don't get lost in the sauce of I need to be right? It's like the 2 ears, 1 mouth thing, right? Like try to speak to be understood, listen to understand. Don't get caught up in semantics and quips, and try to get to the bottom of it. And that's like, I don't know, I guess a recipe for how we try to tackle those types of things when we're talking about conflict.
Was that the first time you've done that though? With like the writing down?
Specifically that, yeah. And it was it was big enough where it took us about 3 or 4 hours to get through the whole conversation. So it's like, usually it's not that in depth, but there were some things that she like levied in her initial, I'm having a problem, that were like really heavy things. And so we decided to do it that way. Or I decided to propose it. She accepted the proposal, and we moved in that way.
Would you do it again that way?
100%. Yeah, I would totally do it again. It was so nice, because when you're in the middle of these like interactions, it's like, oh, well, that, this really pissed me off. And every time like those types of comments would happen, we could make a note about it and then come back and revisit it. And it was like, did you really mean this, or were you just upset? I was just upset. Okay, like, are you sorry about that? Yes, forgiven. Okay, next. It's like you get to move through, and like it's like the strategy that some people use is like texting. Like, we're going to have this argument, but we're only going to text. Right? Have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah, because then you don't accidentally you remove tone.
Yeah.
You don't accidentally say something that you were going to regret in it, like emotionally.
Get all you have to
Decipher.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to say it all with an exclamation point at the end, or else they think they're pissed at you.
Or it doesn't convey that you're mad enough. That on the other hand, I don't know.
Why is there no emoji?
Yeah. No, that was really good.
Yeah,
That's really
that's a good idea.
A million ways to tackle it. How we like. I mean, I guess the short answer to the question is try not to operate when you're hot about something. Like, try to do it in a cool, calm, tactful manner or respectful manner. But also, like, make sure that all the line items are taken care of. If something gets left on the table, it's still going to be there. It's not going anywhere. Talk about it. Keep moving.
The hard thing about that is when you're hot, when you're mad, you know, you probably, it's probably not the best time. Or when they're mad about something, right? Don't bring up some garbage that you're upset about at them when they've had a bad day at work. Like it's the wrong time, bro. Like
Ever
just don't do it.
bring up stuff that's been already taken care of.
And that's the pre-work. There's pre-work to this, right? You're in a relationship with this person. You're saying, look, I love you so much. We're having a beautiful dinner. This is great. I love you. By the way, the next time we argue, here's how I want to handle it. Like that is the time to talk about that and stuff. You know, don't wait for a fight to say, okay, look, here's how we're going to handle it. It's like, set some ground rules so that next time it happens, it's like, I'm going to get super pissed about something someday, I'm sure, right? Guess what? Human alert, right?
Yeah.
When I do that, you, my wife, are allowed to say, you're a little too hot right now. We're not going to talk about this right now. This is that moment, Dave, that we agreed on, that you would walk away from it. Okay, great. And so I get to take my breath and I go and walk away.
The problem, I love that, by the way. I think it's very helpful, very practical. Maybe we should try that.
Maybe we should.
We don't fight though. I'm just kidding.
It's a fight.
What's a fight? No, when I'm hot, I know I'm not supposed to talk. Same, you know, I would say the same for my wife. But at the same time, that is how I end up avoiding tough conversations altogether. I think is because you know, okay, I'm going to mention this later. I'm upset about this. Probably not the right time to, you know, think sober-mindedly. Okay. And then 2 days later, when I'm over it, I'm not thinking about it anymore. I don't know. Because you're trying to figure out what is worth arguing over. Sure. What is worth, you know, we have peace right now, even though inwardly I'm anxious and upset.
So is that
we have peace right now?
is it?
Well, no. I'm talking about it's the struggle. This is the struggle I have, right?
Yeah.
Relationally, you know, me and my wife have peace right now. I don't want to ruin that. It's been a good day. It's been a good 2 days, whatever. But you can trying to decide what's worth having that conversation of correction or like this hurt my feelings or, hey, you're not considering me in this or whatever. Whatever reason you have to argue or to have conflict, you can push it off so much that you never address something that should be addressed, right? And when I cool down, for some reason those things don't think they're as big of a deal anymore. So it's like, well, I don't want to bring up something that's actually not a big deal, and like I had time to reflect on it, and yeah, it wasn't. But then bringing those things up again when you're not upset it's just so hard to do.
Yeah.
Because it's like everything's fine. There's people like at least relationship.
If there's like, so I used to have a super strong opinion about this. It's the idea that like, if it's something that you're still thinking about, if it's something that like you might wake up and think about, you have to address it. Like that's the rule. Like that's the personal rule, right? And it's like, you know, maybe you don't, maybe you do, whatever. But if you choose not to address it, like you're probably still going to think about it. There's some kind of like, you know, unresolved, I don't know, some kind of unresolved idea where it's not true peace if it's still hanging over you, right? And so I think that if it's something that you continue to think about, something that's still bothering you, it's worth addressing. I 100% agree. There's so much that's not worth addressing. There's a lot of stuff that happens, and it's like, I can't believe that there's a spoon in the sink. This sink is supposed to be empty. Spoons go in the dishwasher. What's the deal? It's like, is that really a battle that I want to have right now? Right? Do I want to give feedback about a spoon in the sink and try to like modify behavior about keeping the sink clean? Or do I want to like let that go and put it in the sink myself and be done with it? Like what's the weight? And if the spoon stays in there, this is just an example. If the spoon stays in there, am I going to wake up about it? And if I am going to wake up about it, I have to say something. I think it's a really nice, like little litmus test just for yourself. Because if you have that in you, there isn't peace.
Sometimes it's small, but if it's an everyday occurrence.
Yeah.
No, this is literally, Bria and I had a kind of a big conversation, kind of big conflict one time. And then at the end, it was kind of like, hey, what can I do better? How can is there anything, I've spoken my piece. Is there, I have blind spots. Can we talk about some? And one of the things she mentioned was that exact thing, leaving the stopper, because I do probably like 98% of the spoon guys. I'm not the spoon guy as much as I'm the stopper guy, because I'll do all the dishes, but then I will not remove the stopper. So then next time somebody's rinsing out a plate or whatever, all the food kind of gathers, because the water sort of drains out, but all the stuff doesn't. So if you don't clean that out, then it's like just
You're an animal.
Yeah, I know. I'm a filthy animal. But that was a thing for us. And so it was like, oh, I do the dishes every day, which probably means you think about this every single day. And so those little things can add up to big things if people think you don't care that it bothers them, right? And so, Quinn, what are your thoughts on kind of conflict resolution? And I'm gonna explain why I think this is so important. Go ahead. Obviously, it's important, but why? Just my thoughts.
I do not struggle with holding thoughts and feelings in. That is something that Haley and I had to work through early on. Was we would have conflict, and I would just be like, "All right, let's resolve it right now. Like, let's figure it out." Where she would be like, "No, I need some time to think about this." It's actually been very interesting as we've grown and learned more about each other, and just kind of developed as a married couple. Where I used to be a little like almost confrontational of like, let's figure this out. There are now times where if like she has said something that has rubbed me the wrong way, or I've not liked something, where I will now like withdraw, and not withdraw like emotionally, or relationally, but like to gather my thoughts so I don't misspeak. And I think that's just me growing and, not sticking my foot in my mouth as much as possible. Yeah,
I'm a verbal processor. Yeah, I gets me in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because to your point, I just spew things out.
yeah, and that's where I was.
Thinking about them, I have to process it out loud, and then it can get bad because you're saying too many things.
Yeah, and that's where I was early on, and then learning how she operates and how she thinks. I think that's a huge thing in conflict resolution with your spouse, is understanding who they are emotionally as a person, and certain things that might kind of rub them the wrong way. Resolving conflict kind of in the heat of the moment, you oftentimes don't play fair. And that's the absolute worst thing that you could do in resolving conflict, is bring up old wounds, bring up old stuff that you've allegedly already resolved.
Intent to hurt.
Yeah. And that none of that in any circumstance is good. And so I think just figuring out, for us, it was her understanding who I am as a person, and how I interact, how I resolve conflict, how I approach conflict, my just kind of aggressiveness as a human, how I'm wired, which I've worked on, and verbal communication. But yeah, I think it's understanding who your spouse is, how they best receive any form of feedback. Or I remember an example early on in marriage. So Haley and I had just been married very shortly. I had also only been a Christian for a year and a half, and believe it or not, I wasn't really good at communicating what I thought she should be doing as a Christian woman. That ended poorly. We won't go into any other details, but that ended in what was already an argument, in a large argument.
You said, "Listen, babe, Mark Driscoll says
No,
we should."
No, it wasn't. I've never been a Driscoll guy.
It was someone else.
But it was poor. I sinned against her, and how I thought I was trying to lead her. It was wrong. So we had to work through that. But I mean, how we would work through I pray to God I wouldn't do that to her now. But now how we resolve conflict is, there are, I think, certain levels to conflict where I can make a passive comment or a passive aggressive comment. Like, she's most likely going to call me out. I'm like, hey, don't say things like that to me. Like, that hurts. Like, And as a man, I need to just be like, well, you know what I meant to say. No, like, I'm sorry. I hurt you with my words and I'm sorry. Not, well, what? Because I get in the game of like, well, it was just a joke. I was trying to like make it. No, apologize, own the sin and move on. Make the amendment right there. Like, fix that wound. And then there are, you know, God forbid, bigger things where, I mean, I can't really think of anything big recently, but where it's like, oh, I have really hurt you with my words. Where it takes like, it does take a couple days to like, for us to both come down and then come like back together to have this level conversation where your emotion isn't through, you know, it's like the little guy from Inside Out that like he burns the house down, like, cause he's just so hot. Like once he's calmed down, you can then reason and have these like actual like, hey Quentin, here's where you like said this awful thing. And I now not like trying to defend myself and be like, oh baby, I didn't even realize what I said there. I'm so sorry for what I did and I won't do it again. But I think there's just like the question in the last episode of, you know, the guy that asked, you know, how can I be bold? It's like, well, what level of conflict is this? Like, did you not put the spoon up when she asked you to? Or did you like verbally degrade her? Not in like, I'm not talking about like, you know, screw you type stuff, but like you made a really demeaning comment or you have questioned, like you just degraded her in some way. I think there are different ways for different types of confrontation.
You mentioned sin, and I think it's really important to distinguish between like not every conflict is a sin issue.
Correct.
In my opinion, maybe that's a hot take. Not every time you offend your wife is that a sin issue. You didn't necessarily sin just because your wife's upset at you about one thing or another thing. Other times, yes, obviously, like you've mentioned, like, yeah, I'm wrong. I should not have said that. I lashed out at you. That kind of thing.
Yeah, because conflict can look like totally absent of sin can look like we disagree on how to move forward on this certain family choice or whatever, which can take some time to resolve. That is conflict. That's figuring out how to work through butting of heads on a certain issue. That's way different than, you know, I lost all our money gambling. Like, didn't do it. That's not a thing. But like, that's a, like that, those are way different. Like one could destroy your family. The other one is like, do we upgrade the countertops or not? Like, it's like, you know, those are two different types of conflict, way different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. The reason I bring some of that up, I've realized I like what you said about taking hits. You didn't say it that way, but like when they bring something at you,
Own it.
What's your posture? Yeah. Are you going to own it? Are you going to be defensive? Are you cause, Dave, to your point about calling out reality, you know, there's a time where you do need to realize like, oh, the reality is, yeah, I was harsher than I should have been, or I was harsher. You took it, you received it much more harshly than I meant it.
Yeah.
But that's still not a you problem.
Right.
In some senses, right? And that's still, oh, I need to be more mindful of who you are and how I'm perceived, right? What's it like to be on the other side of me? Because that can be really rough, right? And we all need to think about that. So I think the way you talk to each other is important. One thing I've realized in our relationship, and me and Bria joked about this on our episode, like, I don't remember, it was episode like 4 or 5 or something, but about apologies. I had just kind of embraced that, like, I will always be the one to lead in apologizing. I am that doesn't mean it's any more uncomfortable for me than her. I still hate it, but if that's what I can bring to the relationship, that's what I have to bring.
Right.
And a lot of times it's just, hey, as a leader, there's a lot of things I don't do. And there's a lot of ways that my wife leads our family. And one of the ways I can lead is embracing the conflict, bringing it forward, even if I don't always do it the best way, because I don't. There's times I have said the worst thing I could have said at the worst time I could have said it, right? And she's called me out on that too. But It's not easy, but as a man, I do think we're called to sort of embrace the hits, embrace the conflict. Yes, this is probably going to go poorly for me short term, but like long term, this is what's healthy, right?